Do you ever worry about jumping around too much or laughing too much because of leakage? Well, welcome back to the Crack the Code podcast. And that's something we're going to be talking about today. Today, I'm excited to have Julie Demers here with me. Julie is an experienced holistic pelvic floor therapist dedicated to helping women overcome common but often unspoken pelvic floor challenges, such as urinary leakage and organ prolapse. These problems can affect daily life and intimacy. Julie developed the Pelvic Floor Simplified, a holistic program that empowers women to regain control of their bodies using simple, everyday practices. So, welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you because I hear a lot of women having these issues. They're afraid to jump up and down or laugh too hard because of urinary leakage. And I think it's a really common problem with women, especially in the middle ages. And, they joke about it and we joke about it, but not always do anything about it. So,
Yes, it is very common. One out of two women will have leakage at one point in their lives. And a lot of women think it's part of aging. So it's important to share that there are solutions and that they don't have to live with this.
yeah, and I think that's what we just write it off, that it's just normal and, not even to even explore options for looking after it. So maybe before we get into that part of it, you can give us some background, like how did you become a pelvic floor specialist therapist?
My training, I'm a physical therapist, but when I had my daughter 13 years ago, I had urinary leakage after. I also had pelvic pain. I had multiple symptoms, and that's when I started searching about what was happening. And well, the pelvic floor are muscles, so it's a specialty for physical therapists. And I try to, search and do Kegels, which is often the first thing that we're told to do. And it didn't work out for me. And I decided to just go all in and get certified as a pelvic floor therapist to help other women, because then I discovered that one out of two women will have this. And I was like, it doesn't make sense that we don't talk about it and that there's not enough people helping women with that. So that was the beginning of my journey. And then I became more a holistic therapist because at one point after my third child, physical therapy wasn't helping me. I was still having leaks when I was sneezing, and I didn't want to be the physical therapist that leaked. um, so I went and certified as a yoga therapist, and I discovered low pressure fitness to really reconnect with the whole body, because we are taught in school to look at parts of the body. So I was a pelvic floor physical therapist, but in the end, the pelvic floor is part of the whole system. And it works with the rest of our body, the core, our abdominals, our back muscles, they all work together. So when we just look at the pelvic floor, sometimes we're missing a big part of the puzzle. And it's important to look at everything holistically. And what I say often is that the pelvic floor is often the victim, because when our abs are not working well, when our back muscles, our hip are not working well, our pelvic floor has to hold everything up because it's at the bottom of our pelvis. So it looks like it's the culprit, but often it's the victim of everything not working together. So we have to reconnect with our body and work together.
Yeah, because you don't really hear about anybody saying we should be exercising or doing anything to make that area stronger, except for doing Kegels. Like you said, that's one of the big things that we've been told.
Yes, and Kegels often let down women because they try them. Sometimes they work, and when they work, they're happy about it, but then they have to do a lot of them every day, and at one point they stop, and then they feel that it's their fault that they're still leaking because they stopped doing Kegels. Um, And for one third of women, they have searched this. One third of women don't do them well. They do the opposite movement. So when they do the opposite, they weaken their pelvic floor, which really doesn't help them, makes things worse. And for other women, if their pelvic floor is working overtime because the abs are not working, the hips are not working, well, then they're making their pelvic floor work even more, and sometimes it will give them symptom as pain. So women come to me telling me, I tried Kegels, but it gives me pain, and like, okay, let's just stop this because it's not for you. And I must say that for a lot of women, I don't make them do pelvic floor exercise. I make them reconnect with their pelvic floor so that, they really know which muscle need to be worked on or what little change we need to do, and not do exercise for the rest of their life, because doing Kegels is really boring
Yeah.
and
I
hard to
know.
sustain,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a daily practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said so different women have different issues with the leakage. Like you said, you noticed it after having a child. A lot of women, I think that I know, it's more like as we're going through menopause or
Mhm.
perimenopause, is there sort of different causes?
Yes. Well, so after having a baby, for sure, the pelvic floor has to stretch to let the baby out. But even after having a C-section, they do affect the abdominals. So it does change the posture, and it does change the effect on the pelvic floor. When women arrive at menopause, well, if they are moms, sometimes it's things that haven't been resolved from giving birth
Mm,
that appear, because there's changes in hormones, and then their pelvic floor cannot do overtime anymore, and then it shows symptoms, which are often leaks. But also the change in hormones changes the circulation in around the urethra, and it doesn't protect as much from leakage. So we really need to reconnect to this part of our body to make sure that everything works together. So for sure, in big changes in women's life, the pelvic floor can show symptoms and show that it needs help. It doesn't necessarily need to be trained more, but it does. A symptom needs to be addressed, and let's not ignore this because it changes lives. When women have to live with leaks, they always have that at the back of their minds. They either bring a liner when they know they're going to stand for a long time, or they will, they will prevent themselves from laughing too loud
mhm.
because it adds pressure and might give them leaks. So, once you get this solved, then you don't have to think about it all the time, So it really creates a freedom to women.
Yeah. So how would someone know if, their issues would be something that you could solve, or should they be going to a doctor? Like, was there a kind of a difference in there with the
Um,
symptoms?
well, I've been
Hard to
doing this
know.
for 13 years. What I notice is a lot of time doctors have their own taboos, and doctors will often, push for surgery. And if you have the chance to have a doctor who has interact with a physical therapist, then they might send you there. But there's a long, long wait list because there's not a lot of pelvic floor physios.
Yeah.
I'm a physio, so
Yeah.
for sure
You're
I
gonna
would
say.
I would suggest to women to start with physical therapy because there is no side effects, no side effects to reconnecting to their body and retraining those muscles to work together. Um, I would suggest to try to find a therapist that has a holistic approach because, as I told you, for me at one point, physical therapy wasn't helping me. And even I went to see the best that I knew, to help me because I couldn't figure out what was happening. So I think it's important to have someone that will look at your whole body, how you breathe, how you move, how you hold your upper body, because it all has an impact on your pelvic floor. But I would definitely do that before going to surgery or even some medication. Sometimes for women that have urgency, they will suggest medication. But before changing, how your body works, I would start with the little habits because there's little things that we don't know that we're doing that
Mm.
might really change the way your symptoms appear. So, and if you want, I can give you an example.
Yeah,
A lot
that'd be
of
awesome.
women, go to the restroom before they have a long drive or before watching a movie. Or so when they do that, it's not their body telling them that they need to go to the restroom. It's because they're going for a drive. But if they do that all day long, they go to the restroom when they wake up, they go to the restroom before they go to work, they go to the restroom before they leave the house. So it's never their body telling them when they should go to their restroom. So it's not their bladder telling them this message. So it's their brain. And at one point, their brain will tell them, okay, well, we're leaving, you need to go. And then their bladder is never sending them their message when it's filled. So their bladder might send them messages when it's half filled, because their bladder learns that it doesn't have to fill anymore. When I'm half filled, I need to go. So then it creates urgency and the need to go more often. Or when you go to the restroom because you don't really need to go, you will push with your abdominals, because it's not your bladder that it's controlling. It's not your bladder that's telling you that you need to go. So if you push with your abdominals to go faster, then you're pushing against your pelvic floor and weakening it. So this can give you also symptoms when you have added pressure. Your pelvic floor doesn't hold it because it's used to letting go to the pressure from pushing when you go to the restroom. And those are things that you have learned when we were potty trained.
Yeah.
So we have done this for years and years. So it's hard to retrain it, but it is possible, and it's not that complicated. But we do have to think about it and make sure that we give ourselves a little bit of grace while we are retraining it, because it is something that is ingrained in our in the way that we are living our day.
Oh, I know for sure. I do it all the time. I'm going to have too many meetings in a row. I'll make sure I'm going to the bathroom, or if we're traveling and there is a washroom there, I will go because I don't know how far it is till the next
Yeah.
washroom.
Yeah. So then we're not listening to our body. It's okay to do it once in a while. When we have a long drive, I do tell my kids, just
Yeah.
check. I don't want to stop in 20 minutes. So, if we're close. But other than that, I don't tell them to go if they don't need to, because I really want them to continue feeling their body signals. And that, in our modern world, that's what we forget. And then we have symptoms from that. So we need to just take a step back. And our body is a beautiful machine. And if we can relearn to reconnect with it, then, it will give us a lot of cues to how to help ourselves.
Yeah. Is there sort of amount of time that you should wait in between if you want to kind of retrain your bladder? Like how long
Well,
should you go?
the normal, and in quote unquote, because there's never a normal, and
Hmm.
it depends on your bladder, so there's different things to consider. But they say you should be able to hold between 2 or 3 hours during your day. You should go to the restroom 6 to 8 times per day, because during the night you shouldn't get up to go to the restroom, or once, that is the normal. Yeah, so those are the normal, in quote
Oh,
unquote.
yeah.
But if you're going much more than that, for sure, there's solutions. There's way to retrain your brain, and there's way to see also what can affect your bladder, what can affect your pelvic floor, how do you hold yourself. And sometimes it's just learning to catch yourself. And once you do that, then, you solve your symptoms pretty quickly. And it's really impressive, because at the beginning for me, it was more, linked to activities. So it's a different approach. But when I started helping women, when they learn the habits that they had for a long time, and they can just change it. And it's easy to change when we compare to sugar, sugar
Hmm.
cravings. When you tell somebody stop eating sugar, that's really hard. But when you tell somebody don't push when you go to the restroom, it makes it a bit easier. There's a lot of habits that we can change, but they see results in the first 2 weeks. Always. It's very impressive, because those little habits, when they add up, when you change them, you see results, because you stop working against your body, and your body rewards you for that.
That's nice. So do you have any tips for people that we can share today for what, an
Well,
easy thing they can do that's common?
Well, I guess, not going when you don't need to is a great tip. Listening to your body signals is also great tips. What I tell women a lot is to reconnect with their body. Your pelvic floor should move with your breathing, and I often tell women that you should reconnect your breath with your pelvic floor. It's an easy way to reconnect with those muscles because they're kind of hidden. If I told you
Mhm.
to bend your elbow, it's easy to see if you bend it or not. Your pelvic floor, it's harder to see if it's doing its job or not. So reconnecting with your breath and your pelvic floor is the easiest way to do it, because they do work together. When you breathe in, your pelvic floor should relax, and when you breathe out, your pelvic floor should contract. That is the easiest part. So when you sneeze, your pelvic floor should be contracting to protect having the pressure going down. When you are screaming at a soccer game, that is also, when the air comes out. So that's when your pelvic floor should be protecting you. So we need to regain this connection between our breathing muscles and our pelvic floor. So maybe just take the time to breathe for 5 minutes and try to feel your pelvic floor. Could be an easy way to reconnect first.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because probably most of us don't think about that part when we're breathing. We're connecting to our pelvic floor.
Yeah.
And I think you had said at one point too, there was something about even your posture can affect it. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, definitely. So as I told you, the pressure that goes on your pelvic floor when your pelvic floor is at the bottom of your pelvis. So, and your bladder is over your pelvic floor, and your pelvic floor supports everything. So when there's added pressure from your upper body, it will affect your pelvic floor because it has to hold more. So if your posture is kind of slumped forward, or if you tend to lift heavy things leaning back, it changes your posture, and it changes where the pressure goes, and it always
Mm.
goes to your pelvic floor. Instead of using your bones and your structure, then you're kind of all using everything on your pelvic floor. So the way you breathe when you are stressed can have an impact also on your pelvic floor, because then you're not using the muscles between your ribs. So there's different things that you need to analyze when you want to really relieve the pelvic floor from all the
Yeah.
pressure. So that's why I'm saying that the pelvic floor is often the victim, because there's little things
Yeah.
that we are doing without knowing that always puts pressure on it. So once we relieve that, oftentimes women don't need to do Kegels, because the pressure is gone from the posture, from the upper body, from the breath. So there's different little things that we can do, and this is general wellness. So
Yes.
if we have a better posture, it helps,
Everything.
with the breath, and when we help our breath, it helps our mental health. And you talk also about emotions and how emotion gets stuck in the body, and the pelvic floor and the abdomen are often places where we hold emotions. So releasing all of that is very helpful for our pelvic floor also.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today, Julie. I know a lot of people have this issue and are going to want to reach out to you. What's the best place for people to reach out to you? Of course, I'll have everything in the show notes, but if you want to know what's the easiest way to get a hold of you.
Well, I am trying to talk about this subject more because I want women to know about it. So I have a YouTube channel that I have started to talk about this. But I think the best place to find me is on my website, and then you can find, my Facebook page and my Instagram, and you can find where I am hanging. So my website is my name, so juliedemers.com. And then there's also free resources. I have free training where I teach really how to connect with your breath, and how there's 4 steps to really regain control on the pelvic floor. And I think, with what we discussed today, that would be a
Yeah.
great step to go further if it's something that women are struggling with.
That's great. I'm sure lots of people are going to want to get that one because I hear people, women talking about it all the time, but not always really doing anything about it or even knowing that there is something they can do about it. So thank you so much for coming here and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And everyone listening, if this is you or if it's not you and you know somebody that's going through this, because I know there's a lot of us out there, reach out, check this a podcast, get the information and start with that free training or just reach out to Julie and learn more about it because it is never too late.